Hello, beautiful souls. I'm your host, Shakira Moore, and welcome to another episode of the Perspective Matters podcast. I have a special treat for you today. I will be having a special guest for this episode, and the special guest is none other than my good friend, Jermaine O'Connor. Now, Jermaine is the published author of two amazing poetry books. First one, Reminders and Revelations, and his second book, The Resolve. So for this episode, we'll be talking a bit about how he's been coping with the new normal and some strategies he has in place for coping, and we'll dive a little deeper into his two books. And I have favorites in each that we're going to talk about because they are timeless and I think also very relevant to what we're going through right now. And they provide a sense of inspiration and comfort and hope. So I wanted to share the poems with you, and we're going to just discuss them some more and pick out some important nuggets and gems. So stay tuned. Thank you for agreeing to be the guest on my show. So just tell the people a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and then let's just dive right into what are some of the strategies that you've implemented since we've been asked to stay indoors more often and practice social distancing.
Great. So my name is Jermaine O'Connor. I'm a marketing professional. I focus on social media a lot. I have a background in video marketing, YouTube, bit of Amazon, some display. So I guess I'm a little bit well-rounded there. So that's me, highly creative. I really enjoy writing and music.
Yeah. Now that we have our new normal, which is staying indoors, and we have to venture outside, we practice social distancing. What are some of the ways that you've been coping with our new normal?
Good question. In terms of the outbreak and staying home, it's great because you're not being really monitored.
Yeah.
I can kind of use the time a little bit more for myself and essentially do a little bit more writing, more reading, music playing, just kind of taking advantage of being in my space, creating balance and structure, or reinforcing. That's, taking breaks, being mindful that I'm at home and I'm working, so I have to kind of use the space to my advantage.
Right.
And, whether that's working in my living room versus my bed, making sure that I'm taking breaks in the way that I would if I was at the office. Considering nothing is at my house, my area, it's really about how to take advantage and being good with, I guess you could say, a minimal lifestyle. The idea that, we have less.
Yeah.
So being good with enough and understanding that, your home can be all you need if you are tactical about and in control. Again, taking those breaks. I have a dog, so I try to walk her midday. She always needs an evening walk.
Yeah.
So I try to structure that out as well with having calls and duties at work, obviously, and emails to answer. So striking that balance and really making sure that my health is in check. As much as at the office, we typically sit all day, we usually are more, I think, granted the opportunity to kind of get up and do what we need to do as long as our work is getting done.
Yeah.
So applying that at home in the sense that it's real easy to sit on your couch for 12 hours.
Right.
Are you eating? Are you taking a break? Are you staring at the same, emails, your inbox all day? Or are you switching it up?
So the idea is to try and maintain a similar routine at home as you were in the office once you're within the work hours of, say, 9 to 5. So take regular breaks.
Yeah.
Stay hydrated.
Yeah.
Move around. Of course, being at home has introduced new things into your routine. So of course you have to walk Mia, which wouldn't have happened if you were in the office.
Exactly.
So coping means just shifting and adjusting your workday routine.
Yeah, it's necessary. It's a challenge, remaining disciplined above all else.
So how do you stay connected with your friends and other coworkers in light of you not being able to meet up? Because I know for you, one of the important things to you then is being able to like see your friends and hang out and to meet with them and to collaborate because you're a creative.
Yeah.
So, how have you been able to adapt and what have you put in place to still be able to function as a creative and still collaborate with your friends and still meet?
Well, funny enough, all that collaboration has been brought to a halt.
Yeah.
We've actually, up until maybe 2 weeks ago, we were meeting up every Saturday for the last 2 years almost.
Right.
So we're looking at it as this is some much needed time for ourselves. However, we still stay connected via WhatsApp, just being like, this is what's going on at work. How you guys doing? You know, when this blows over, we'll get right back to it. But still doing our own thing in our own nests.
Right.
Those check-ins are important, even from a non-creative or productive standpoint. It's really just, how you guys doing? How are we doing? Right?
Right.
So I have a few group chats going where we just pretty much we're sharing memes, joking about it, but in a way that just keeps us positive because it's probably foreseeably getting a little worse than it is now. But just being, mindful of the climate, inspiring each other,
Right.
keeping our spirits up, and just looking out for each other. That's been probably more necessary than even the creative check-ins.
Right.
Even just venting, even if we have to. The home time does grant more alone time. So being able to dive more into creative work and kind of being in your own world, it's often a luxury that we're not always afford in this 9 to 5 world. So
Right. Speaking of more alone time, I've noticed there is now an emerging theme which encourages people to do a lot more introspection, a lot more reflection.
yeah,
So, do you find that you are doing more of that now that you have the luxury of more alone time, or it's business as usual where your mental well being and a personal mental check in is concerned?
I think I'm probably a bit more introspective and all of that now with the alone time.
Yeah.
I think it's an environment thing. My home is probably where I create the most.
Right.
The introspection and the well-being and all of that built the habits at home.
Right.
So kind of being at home more now, as much as there's emails and calls to make,
Right.
my brain is in that environment of being shut in. So it's kind of like being able to have a staycation. And I was planning one, but I may not need one anymore because I'll be at home, right?
Right.
So, yeah, that's how it is. Yeah.
So, in terms of keeping your spirits up and staying entertained when you're no longer required to be on, meaning you're no longer required to be doing work, like what is your go to for entertainment and relaxation and fun?
For me, my go to is usually more gaming and more binge watching. And that's really because probably when things were faster, busier, I tried to use my time more productively.
Yeah.
And now I'm learning not to judge that as much.
Right.
So thinking that okay, I worked 9 to 5. Now 6 to midnight, I gotta grind some more, and it's important the work ethic and the routine. You have goals and ambitions, but knowing that if there's an evening where I just want to watch like 5 episodes of something, that there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah,
Yeah. If you pay attention to the world, you feel like you're not being as productive as you should be, and you can't take a break.
exactly.
You sleep when you're dead, you rest when you're dead. When you're just starting out, it makes sense. You can easily buy into that kind of philosophy, but it's not sustainable.
Exactly.
And if you're not careful, you'll burn yourself out.
Yeah.
So the idea then is to not buy into that mindset where you are constantly on the go and it is okay to take a step back.
Yeah.
It's okay to take a break.
Yeah.
And you don't have to feel guilty, because the trouble is you do take the break, but then you can't enjoy it because you're riddled with guilt.
Yeah.
I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I should be planning. I should be strategizing. Why am I watching 5 episodes of this show? When you do need a break, the mind needs a break to rest.
Yeah.
And, you need to regroup, recalibrate, and then go at it again. So I'm very glad you raised the point about it being okay to just take a break and just relaxing and enjoying it as well.
Exactly. It circles back to balance, right?
Right.
And rest is an important ingredient to any routine. So, if you get 10 things a day, it's probably great. But, if you're doing one thing after another, as opposed to maybe a break in between, there's nothing wrong with getting 5 things done in the day.
Right.
So learning that or unlearning that and relying on yourself not to judge yourself too much.
Right.
That's another thing, to learn that, because eventually when this all blows over, everyone would hopefully all got to go back to work. And the adjustment of going from being couch bound, homebound, to the desk, the commute. So
Right.
keeping that balance, and yeah.
So trying not to deviate from your set routine. And that's something I talked about in one of the last episodes, where if you are able to do your best to keep a routine and to keep your mind in that space where between 9 and 5, if that's your work time, then you're at work. As long as you have work to do and you're still employed, then, or even if you work for yourself, keep your routine where you're on for that length of time and then carry on with the rest of your day. Because the minute you deviate and deviate so greatly from your routine, when things start to pick up and we start to resume what was our previous life, then you don't want to have to make such great readjustments and then having to struggle with being able to get up at 6 again and getting into the office for 8 or for 9 or whatever your routine was before.
Yeah, exactly.
And I find that's been working for me. So keeping my routine as best as possible, trying to live as normal a life as possible.
Exactly.
In spite of what is going on now, like, it helps me to cope and it helps me to still clutch on to some measure of control. Because I think what would cause panic or what would cause some kind of worry or disturbance is you losing control or losing a sense of your own reality. Because before 2 weeks ago, whether or not we liked it, admitted it, or even appreciated it, we all lived by a specific routine.
Yeah.
Got up at 6, got in the office by 8, got coffee, sat at your desk, had your first meeting, blinked 2 times, it was 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And you do that cycle for 5 days, and then Saturday and Sunday were up in the air. You did whatever you wanted to do, and Monday you're back at it again, and that was your life. If you are, you're an employer, if you work for yourself or whatever. COVID happened and then boom, you're forced to stay home. So there's no more need to rush through the door.
Yeah.
There's no more need to say, oh, I have to beat the traffic. There's no traffic to beat because we're all indoors. So how do you try to hold on to some measure of control when it's being snatched away from you, in some cases quite subtly and in others in a significant way?
Exactly.
So that's something to be mindful about.
Yeah. It's a challenge of self regulation, autonomy, right? Not so much as relying on the 9 to 5 timeline, but to acknowledge the time you have. So, you have 9 to 5, and that's one area of your life, and how are you structuring the rest of it, right?
Right.
And so if that 9 to 5 is gone, okay, what can you make more time for? You don't commute anymore, maybe you are reading more, different things like that.
Yeah. And what I can say, having had to make the adjustments to what is now my new normal, I've started to question the value I place on certain things and started to question what is important versus what isn't.
Yeah,
So you realize, oh, like having to get up, having to go into work, having to work hard, having to grind, having places to go and people to meet and things to do.
yeah,
This feeling of being so important and so busy.
yeah,
Like that's what you're valued. But when you have nowhere to go, you can't meet anybody, you're forced to be in your own space and to deal with yourself
exactly.
and maybe others if you live in a larger household. Then you start to question what is really important, and do I need to then readjust and reassess the things that hold near and dear to me?
Exactly.
So my hope is as we continue to stay in this confinement and as we are forced to face what is now becoming our new normal, that we start to question the things that we place value on and not be afraid to ask the questions and not be afraid to answer them too.
Yeah,
And sit with it because it's not necessarily a comfortable thing to do.
yeah,
So be okay with being uncomfortable.
exactly.
It's interesting times that we live in. For me, there hasn't been much adjustment because I'm by myself. So there isn't another person I have to interact with 24/7 and having to cope with another person in my space.
Yeah,
So for me, it's almost like business as usual.
yeah,
But for those of us who now have to deal with a spouse and deal with children, like how do you adjust?
yeah,
And how do you become comfortable with what is now making you uncomfortable? Because for some of us, work was a means of escape.
yeah,
School was a means of escape. Having activities outside of our dwelling was our way of escaping.
yeah,
So now that there is nowhere to escape to, how do you cope? I think that's a question that we all at some point have to face.
yeah,
The answer might not be easy to come to terms with, but I think it's necessary.
yeah.
So, in terms of coping, do you have a book that you turn to, a philosophy that you pay more attention to? Is there a thought leader that you really start to take more interest in terms of your spirituality? Then, what are you holding on to in these times?
Good question. My spirituality, I won't say it's changed. It's amplified. One thing I typically do, aside from journaling every few days or almost every day, I do try as well visualization, meditation before I sleep.
Right.
So without thinking anxiously, I just think futuristically in terms of what I actually painting a picture, almost like a mental mood board, if you want to, or mental vision board, I should say.
Mental vision board. I like it.
Yeah, so, whether you believe in law of attraction and all of that,
Right.
there's benefits to it. It gets you visualizing what you want more and more, and it allows, your dreams and goals to become more concrete. And thus, when you kind of open your eyes and you end up in the real world, you have these images ingrained in your head,
Right.
then continue to seek them out in terms of your actions and the environments you put yourself in, the people you connect with, the content you consume.
Right.
And so I've continued doing that unless I just fall asleep. I just, yeah, so I do that. And that's been a good anchor for me.
Yeah.
I think what's really important has been doubling down on or just reminding myself of the anchors I always sort of had. And I say that because, again, we get caught up in everything and you kind of forget that you have a favorite song or a favorite movie
Yeah.
or a favorite book. And sometimes that's all you gotta remind yourself of. So sometimes you just need 30 minutes to play a whole bunch of songs, and then you actually do forget about what you have to worry about tomorrow, and you forget about what you did during the day.
Yeah.
So again, that alone time and that privacy has allowed me to do that. Circling back to spirituality and how that kind of plays a part is, I mean, I used to meditate way back.
Yeah.
I found that helped me feel very light and very grounded in a sense, but more aware.
Yeah.
I learned the importance of having, beliefs and sort of philosophies and things that you return to in good or bad times.
Yeah.
So I've always been somebody who identifies with the turtle or the tortoise.
Right.
I mean, when you Google them and stuff, symbolically, they have themes around self preservation, patience, the idea that no matter where you are is the right place. So there's never a wrong place. Or better yet, there's never even a wrong time. Looking at where everything is,
Right.
and this is to be applied, on a micro level for yourself. But applying it to myself, it's that okay, work is slowed down, things are going on, but for me, there's a positive thing here that I can dig up, that I can find here. I have more time. Okay, so more time means I can do this now. More being alone now means I can rest more, or different things like that. And it's about not ignoring the negative. It's just kind of being, I guess, realistically balanced as you can be, but thinking about it as this is an opportunity for me to take care of myself more. Sure, I'm not maybe able to work. Sure, there's this, sure, there's that. But right now, this is where things are. So where I am doesn't mean that I can necessarily give less or do less. It's about not thinking about before or after, thinking about now, right?
Right.
So, that spirituality and thinking of the tortoise and thinking like that is you're never in the wrong place or the wrong time. You're here is always there and there is always here.
Right.
So thinking about that for myself, that's how I've been able to also remain positive and sort of pace myself that way. And it allows me to face an obstacle one after another and not really be too frightful, I guess, or as anxious, reminding myself that this will pretty much pass, but being very much focused on the present.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned reminders, and I'm happy you also brought up books because for me, I think being able to read more has been helpful in terms of just one, distracting myself, two, exposing myself to new information, and three, just it's a good way for me to cope.
Yeah.
Speaking of books and reminders, you wrote two books.
Yeah.
And they are amazing books, I must say.
Thank you.
There are a couple poems that I've highlighted as good examples of ways to just think or perspectives to just chew on in light of what is happening now. So, your first book, Reminders and Revelations.
Yeah.
I rave about this book all the time because it's a timeless piece of work.
Thank you.
And regardless of what you're going through, there's a poem in there that describes the situation or gives you some sense of hope. So I rave about this one. And then your second work, The Resolve. And I feel like in a time like now where we're slowly losing our grip on reality and we're slowly having to let go of control and routine, being able to hold on to some measure of resolve and being able to, still hold on to some sense of self amidst all this chaos, I think is like truly, it's important. So I just wanted to dive right in and I'm going to start with your second book. And there are two poems that I think you can find some value in and will help you to just reshape, reframe your perspective and outlook on life in light of what is happening now. So the first one that I found interesting was belonging. Do you want to do the honors and read that one?
Yeah.
Go for it.
That belonging. Feel it. Do not leave it. Hold it in your sight and deeper in your lungs. Stay with it. Warm yourself to its invitation. Stay until the opening is there and then give to it. Once you welcome who it is asking you to be, you will ultimately deserve it. So, this was a piece about really embracing and kind of being close to your intuition and sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And the idea that it's going to come from within and less about the feeling of belonging that comes from an environment or a group of people. It's about going within and finding that home that you then carry with, right?
Right.
When it comes to life and all of that, we tend to attribute success as the next thing.
Right.
So when I get the car, I will. When I get the job, I will, and it misplaces, your power as well. So yeah, belonging is that understanding of it's from within. And that person who took that feeling of belonging is going to require a deeper sense of self, a deeper closeness to yourself to access it. And that person that ends up feeling that belonging is then the one who's going to carry that feeling of belonging, that feeling of home wherever they go.
Right.
It's an idea of confidence, but it's also in the sense, not just confidence in the sense of I can do something, but it's also the self-assurance of I am. So that's what that piece.
Yeah, those are some of the reasons I chose this one to start with, because prior to being confined, most of us, I think, would allow our identity to be wrapped up in what we do,
Yeah.
what we have,
Yeah.
what we've achieved. And now that we are forced to stay indoors, there is no work to go to.
Yeah.
There's no business to run because most of them have shut their doors.
Yeah.
There's no service to provide anymore. So now that you don't have those things with which to identify yourself with, who are you?
Exactly.
And know that you're forced to spend more time with yourself and you're forced to confront yourself. Who are you? And where do you fit in? Where do you belong in your own life, in the grand scheme of things, in this whole human existence, this whole human experience?
Yeah.
So though those are some of the questions that I have to ask myself and I confront myself with from time to time, because if you continue to get caught up in this rat race, as I call life sometimes, it's easy for you to lose yourself and wanting to do things that allow you to fit in. So you measure your success of achieving. I knew there were poems that I could count on to raise certain issues and ask certain questions. And this was the first one. I was like, yes, this is this is a great way to start the conversation.
Yeah.
So the second one I found was liberation versus loneliness. I feel alone. I was like, yes. One, we're confined. And two, now we have to confront ourselves. So most of us are alone.
Yeah.
So cut off from everybody else. How do you confront that? So yeah, I'm going to ask you to read this one again.
Yes, no, of course. So it goes liberation versus loneliness. What is it that we desire from ourselves? Silence is company, silence enshrouds. I find it interesting how much we are without, how much we can become with, and why we lose sight of one circumstance for the other.
I'm finger snapping right now.
Yeah, so this one, the first thing that inspired me on this one was most of my life, I'll say even anyone that really knows me knows I'm pretty independent and emotionally independent and self reliant.
Yeah.
And so with that, you lone wolf it, you live in your own world.
Yeah.
People, I think they, one, as much as they may not see the value in it, not many understand the differences. And they attribute it very much in a physical, environmental sense of not being around people, thus being lonely, or are you alone? Or even better, are you, sort of liberated? And so how much we are without and how much we can become with.
Yeah.
So I've always looked at things as being who I can, being who I am without. I think society in general, again, when we talk about success and things, we do think a lot more about how much we can become with. Getting that thing, those people make me this. And the fact that, you can kind of go one way and forget the other, or one gets sacrificed in order to strive for the other. And, how much we are without is then, to me, the most liberating thing.
Yeah.
What you're able to accomplish, but not just materially, but, just even in the sense of striving for something as simple as peace, right? How liberating that is to know you can be your own provider of something like that, your own sovereignty, and how much we can become with a lot of times, again, a team, having good people around you, that's always important, but we know the work can't be done with them.
Yeah.
Or they can't do it for us. The hard work in ourselves is our job, right?
Right.
So thinking that it's the idea of dependency, right?
Right.
Not support, but dependency. There's a difference there. And so in a time like this, it comes down to, how can we support each other, but knowing how much we are without is where I think many of us should strive to be.
Right.
Getting in that mentality of without everything, who am I? Yeah, what is left? What is left? Am I defined by my friends, or am I defined by my actions and things like that?
Right.
So being in your own company can reinforce that liberation depending on how you look at it. So that's where I was coming from in writing that. And a lot of people might look at my view as lonely when I don't see it that way at all.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that because that's the space I'm in now. So I'd say maybe 5 years ago, I would have looked at it as loneliness.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like my own company. And being alone and being silent was the hardest thing to do because it meant having to face myself. And that was uncomfortable and it was hard and it was painful to do.
Yeah.
Fast forward 5 years, I absolutely enjoy my own company. I'm highly entertaining. And to me, silence is the best thing ever. No, I'm sitting on the other side of liberation when I can get to a place in my life where if I don't interact with another human being for an extended period, it doesn't affect my mood.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect how I think about myself.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect me full stop because I am confident in who I am as an individual. I'm comfortable with who I am. I like silence. It gives me a chance to think,
Yeah.
to reflect, to process, to heal.
Yeah.
It gives me a chance to just be without any strings or influence from any outsider then or any outside influence.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I picked this poem, because in a time like this, where there are some of us who do live alone, do we see it as loneliness or do we see it as liberation? Is this a time for us to wallow in self-pity because we don't have a quarantine bay? And we don't have anybody else to connect with? Or is it a time of liberation where you are comfortable regardless and you are just free to be and free to exist in your own space? And if you do have to share your space with somebody else, are you still able to find freedom in that? Can you create in your own mind a place to escape and just be?
Yeah.
So that's why I mentioned this poem and I chose this one because this was written years ago. And it's still very relevant today. And that's why I appreciate your work, because it's intentional. Work is so timeless and it is able to cross situations. It's able to impact people regardless of gender, beliefs, social status.
Yeah.
As long as you call yourself human, as long as you have humanity within you, then you'll be able to relate. And for me, that's why I thought this poem was important to share with everybody else, because it's all about your perspective. Like this podcast's name, it's all about how you look at things.
Yeah.
So if you are forced to stay inside, if you're forced to sit in silence and confront yourself, is it going to be a liberating experience or is it going to be a lonely one?
And one thing I'll even add to the idea too is I kind of look at it in dualities where, some people, you could describe them as a complete bucket of water, and some people have a bucket with a hole in it. And you go to the well, you fill the water, and you are then, if you're the one with the hole in it, you're going to be looking for somebody who doesn't have a hole in their bucket, and you're going to ask them to pour you some water, and they pour that water into the bucket, but you got a hole in it, so that water is going to deplete, and you're going to be looking for another bucket to fill you up. Striving to kind of be that full bucket, not that you go around pouring in everyone else's bucket, but the idea that you being a full bucket means, you can fill yourself up whenever you need to. You bring your bucket to the well, and, boom, you fill it up. You go back and you fill it up, you use it, you fill it up. The idea there is how much you can be without. Yeah, that's kind of where this piece sort of brought me.
So that was the resolve. I'll put the Amazon link in my show notes for those of us who do like a good book of poetry. And then we're going to now talk about my absolute favorite. The one I keep hounding